Hold on a second. Okay, great. So this is Leonard Abrams, the publisher of the East Village Eye. And Leonard, I understand you're a native New Yorker, so what brought you down to the East Village?
I guess I should be looking at the camera. Well, I was born in Brooklyn, but I didn't grow up at all in the city. I grew up in Spring Valley, which is about 30-40 miles away. But being in a small town, I really hated the small-mindedness of the people that I seemed to meet there, and so and my father had a business in the city, and so we had relatives in the city, so I was familiar with the city. We used to come here a lot, and so when I got older, I just couldn't wait to get here because I knew that here people didn't care, and I took that was okay. That was okay with me. So I went to college here.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Fordham at Lincoln Center. And I dropped out. I did some traveling. I lived in Colorado, in Boston, and then I moved back to the city. First time I was in the I was here in the mid-70s. I was a bicycle messenger, and then I moved around. And I came back in the late 70s, and I went back to school, and then I started the East Village Eye in 1979. Dropped out of school again.
What was your major at school?
Comparative literature. And I've been in the city ever since, if you count Brooklyn.
What brought you down to the East Village in particular?
When I was a kid, like my parents who thought of themselves as liberal in some ways, they would take us to the village to look at the artists. The arts, they would have art on the sidewalk.
Right.
And the East Village was like a big no-no, like, oh, don't go over there, that's the bad part.
Right.
So then when I moved here, I just kind of really stumbled on it again, and I realized, well, as I was being a bicycle messenger, really, what the thing was that what the people told me this was the place to be. I started out on 63rd and 11th.
Right.
And then I moved down here, and it was like the remnants of the hippie stuff.
Right.
And it was quiet. It was really quiet.
Right.
It was the end of the drug burnout, which killed the East Village hippie scene. And in the mid '70s, there was just the punk action was just starting.
Right.
I wandered into CBGBs. I saw Television. And I just thought, oh, good band.
Tom Verlaine.
Yeah. Then I saw the shirts, and I thought, that's punk rock. But I didn't hear. I never heard the expression. But that was what I thought it was. It was. Anyway, so I always wanted to start a paper. Always, and I even started one in Denver, and it was a flop. So when I came back, as soon as I could do it, I just did it.
All right.
And that kept me here for a good stretch.
Okay, let's pause for a second.
Now, the more pointed, specific questions you ask me, the more I'll stay on.
No, that's fine. What you said is good.
Okay.
This way I can sit here and.
Okay.
So you decided to publish this newspaper. What brought that about? And that was before the East Village art movement, right? 79?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you know, at that time, even the artists weren't making art. They were making music. I mean, they were, but a lot of them just quit and started making music, paintings,
Right.
you know. I wanted to create a community in print. That was my idea.
I see.
I wanted people. I wanted the discourse to happen on the pages. I wanted to be like a place where people could communicate in a communal environment.
Well, the East Village Eye certainly did that.
Yeah.
Because it was the voice of the East Village for many years. How many years was it published? Can you remember?
First one was May '79, and the last one was January '87.
I see.
So that's what is that? 6.5 years, something like that.
At least
7 years. 6.5 years. Yeah,
I see. At a certain point, the East Village art gallery movement starts up.
Yeah.
Now, what was that like? Was that a surprise, or did you feel that did you predict that, or describe kind of generally your feelings concerning this?
Well, yeah, I guess it was a surprise to me, because really it was, first of all, it was a whole crop of artists that were not the people that I knew making art when I started.
Right.
I mean, a few of them were. I mean, Keith Haring was, Kenny Sharp was, David Wojnarowicz was. They were people. They were making art, but I mean, for example, Collab. There was a bunch of artists in the late '70s. They got together in the late '70s, really for the purpose of, a lot of it was just getting grant money, and then it was also they put on the Times Square show and some other shows. They were not East Village art. They were well underway in the '70s.
Right.
They were like the older brothers and sisters of the East Village art movement. Really.
Right.
But I think that some of these group shows, the Times Square show, which was the summer of 1980, and then there was the show or shows on the pier.
Right.
And then there was a big show in El Bohio.
Right. Tell me something about the pier. What was that?
I don't know anything about it. Well, all I know is that it happened, really. I mean,
right.
Other than I'm sure
an abandoned pier.
A lot more. It was
right.
an abandoned pier and people did more. I guess partly a lot of people were inspired by what they saw going on.
Right.
I'm sure that someone else could tell you why people chose to paint at the time. There was a big turning away from painting in the 70s. People didn't. They were turning away from anything that could be commodified.
Right.
People were making, spiral jetty. People were making stuff that could never be sold.
Robert Smithson, right.
Right. And people were doing this. That's where performance art started. And people were probably out of performance art. You could say came like a lot of the art bands. People went to art school and they made music. They were making pop music.
Right.
Or avant pop, whatever.
Well, your newspaper was really the voice of a lot of the stuff that was going on.
Yeah. Well, okay. Just to finish the thought.
Go ahead.
I can't tell you. I mean, I don't know exactly why people turned back to making paintings, making commodifiable stuff. Maybe they wanted something they could sell, or maybe they just chose that. But there was a shift over to the plastic arts.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wish I could tell you. I was right in the middle of it. I don't know why it just happened. I can tell you why the arts as a whole happened. That I can tell you.
Well, what are your thoughts about that, then?
Okay. And that was that the thing that made New York so great in the 70s and in the early 80s for artists was that so many people didn't want to be here. It was so cheap to live in New York City because housing was like cheap as dirt. I was a bicycle messenger. I made the rent in 2 days.
Great.
2 days out of the month. I could do whatever I wanted. Anyone could do whatever they wanted. You just pick up some kind of job, and I'll tell you, the jobs weren't that hard to find anyway. Just risk your neck being a bicycle messenger. You could already make enough. And then you could just do whatever you wanted. So this is the ideal situation for artists, because all they need, what they primarily need is time, and that's what they don't have. That's what we don't have today. Time.
Right.
Time, you know, so okay.
You can't just drop out and live in New York now.
No. No. You could do it then. And then you still had New York, which, you know, despite all the going bankrupt and all the people leaving, all the white people, the middle class leaving, all these people leaving, you still had so many services and so many services for artists. There was some of the art scene was still here largely. People would go to California, but forget it. It never really happened there in a big way. I mean, all these facilities were here. So it was a paradise. Now, in the beginning, it was first it was a drag because the drug thing was this heroin scene was out of control. We're talking early 70s. Then it just kind of got so... Then even the hippies left. So there was, there was this huge vacuum. So once things calmed down, burnt out, things started to happen. You know, people could do what they wanted because of this vacuum. And I think that's what it was.
What now? Why did young artists have to create their own galleries to show their art? In terms of the structure that was already existing. I mean, why didn't
they just go to the gallery?
Soho,
because, you know. Why? Well, I mean, it's the same. You know, it's the same thing happened in art, in music, in nearly every artistic field. It was all sewn up.
Right.
There was the whole Vietnam era. There was this whole, I wouldn't even call it that. So as far as art went, art really never got, I mean, it got shook up in the 60s like everything else, but it's always been for the elite, and it still is, but maybe because so many people went to college that they started making art and appreciating art. How are we doing there?
Good.
And then they went out. Then they went out in the world. They started making art, and nobody wanted to know about it in like 99% of the cases. And they probably thought, well, just take this real estate, let's pay another $100 a month, and open a gallery. It's like, so they made their own, and which is a great thing.
Was that at all influenced by the music, the punk movement, the new wave, that do-it-yourself kind of style? Do you think?
I think it was, I'm sure it was. I think it was also influenced by Joseph Beuys. Because his approach to art was basically, art is doing what's needed at the time. And I think a lot of people took that point of view and said, okay, this is what's needed, I'll do it. Need to make the space to make the art, I'll do it. Need to make punk rock, I'll do it. I need to subvert the government. I need to blow something up, I'll do it because that's what's needed at this time, and I'm an artist and I'm going to go and do it.
Right.
And so people, they just thought, all right, well, we'll just make the spaces. And I think it started with artist-run spaces. And I think then a whole crop of art-oriented entrepreneurs would be gallery owners, would be real gallery owners, so to speak. Oh, I shouldn't say that. I should say would be legitimate, so to speak, gallery owners decided that they would take a leaf from the artist's book and start their own galleries and create their own scene. Now, I'm sure some of them wanted to do that, and some of them they just wanted to have a gallery. And you'll see that a lot of people ended up in Soho. And maybe that's where they always wanted to be, or maybe they compromised to go there, or maybe Soho cried out for them. Which I doubt.
Can you focus on a couple of highlights from the Eye that in particular stand out to you?
No.
Just,
There's so many. I mean, you have to, you can narrow it down a little. That would help.
Right. I understand that David Wojnarowicz published some of his first works in the East Village Eye.
David Wojnarowicz. I guess it was. He may have been his first publishing. I don't know. But I became friendly with him.
Yeah.
David was really a great guy. He was so real. Just incredible. When the Eye first started, he sent me a few things, and much to my shame, I have to admit I never used them.
Was some of the founders that were involved with the first East Village Eye were Christoph Kohlhofer?
Chris Kohlhofer, yeah.
And Seth?
That doesn't have anything to do with Wojnarowicz.
Right.
Let me finish my Wojnarowicz.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
So anyway, he came to. I mean, so we became friendly, and then he said he wanted to. He had some stuff that he's writing.
Yeah.
And I loved it right off, and he had this. He called it sidewalk begging, but then I thought, well, let's just call it Wojnarowicz because that's the deal.
Right.
So after the first one, I asked him to do it as often as he could. So I think he only did 4 of them because it was towards the end. But it was really it was strong stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on David?
No, I'm not going to get into the.
I'm interested. I am interested in his article on Gary, Indiana, especially since Gary, Indiana claims that he wasn't part of the East Village. In the October issue of Art Forum, he says he tries to distance himself as much as possible from the East Village art movement. But I feel like he was really involved with the East Village art movement.
Well, let me quote Wojnarowicz. That's how it started. Carlo McCormick interviewed Wojnarowicz for the Eye, and I loved his work, so that's how we became friendly, and so I was glad to have the writing. Wojnarowicz said to Carlo in the interview, he said, if the East Village art scene were one big neck, I would volunteer to strangle it. So I'd have to say that any successful East Village artist, and when I say successful, I mean successful in their work, didn't want to be associated with the East Village art scene.
Right.
Because they seems, I guess, not really not like the, not as they were at the time of the Surrealists, perhaps. So they, I don't know, you'd get a card or something. I mean, they were a group. They were a well-defined group.
Right.
And people, I think it's gone out of fashion.
But the East Village, as an event, a cultural happening, was not a unified group.
No, not really. You see, to answer you about Gary, Indiana, Gary didn't start as an art critic. Gary started as he was writing plays, he was writing articles, he was writing poems, but he wasn't writing about art. If he was, it was in private because it wasn't getting published. Right. He was writing about film. He considered himself, what am I saying? he was the film editor of the East Village Eye in the early 80s. And then he started writing about art for the Village Voice, which he afforded him a living, which is more than we could do for him at the Eye. So I think that had a lot to do with it. I consider David Vonarovich the epitome of everything that's was best about the East Village art scene, our East Village art movement, if there was one. But he wouldn't want to be. He wouldn't want to be thought of that way. He didn't want to be thought of that way. But I can't help but think of him that way. So,
was his art politicized? You think, or art for art's sake, so to speak?
I think towards the end he got very strident, vehement. He was so angry at these people who were blaming gay people for being sick with AIDS and for being gay.
Yeah.
It colored his work. But when the major painting period that where he did, I think, his best work, it was past any politics or ideology. It was straight to the guts, to the heart.
Right.
And he was just transmitting a view, should I say, a visceral feeling and a view of humanity. You can draw political viewpoints from it, but it was beyond political.
Okay.
Even though he used a lot of symbolism, that's very specific.
Was he sort of like an ethnographer, like a sort of sociological viewpoint? I know his waterfront journals were just published, and there were interviews with street people, where he brought out.
I don't think he was concerned. I mean, I think that I haven't read it, but from what I know about him, I think his interest in the people's ethnic background didn't have to do with his interest in their ethnicity. I just think it was a maybe just a starting point or a framework to look at them as individuals or as people who had gone through these radical experiences of abuse and violence that had changed them, made them into people with kind of threw their humanity into high relief.
Right.
The things that they'd been through.
Yes.
I think that was his interest in them.
I see. Tell me something about then this art movement peaked and sort of imploded or fell apart or disintegrated very rapidly.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Give me some ideas on that one.
All right, I'll do the best I can.
Well, would you say it was amazing? It was
well, what happened, as far as I could tell, was that there were a handful of people like Vonarovich and Keith Haring and Kenny Scharf and Jean-Michel Basquiat and a handful of other people who were doing great work. And they inspired so many people. They inspired so many people to make art in this environment and show art in this environment. I swear to you, that around 1980, I'm not sure if there were 5 galleries in the East Village. And in 1985, at the peak of the East Village art thing, there probably were, with no exaggeration, 100 galleries.
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
Maybe more. Now today, we may be back to 5 here. I don't know. I don't think there are a dozen.
Right.
So what happened was that you have this core of people who are doing great work, and then you have this other core. You have this group surrounding them, shall we say, who were inspired by them to do art, to make art, and then there was a larger group around that who were inspired by whatever they saw, which they may not even have comprehended, to be a part of the art scene. And so, as always happens in our society, you get all kinds flocking in. You get the geeks, the charlatans, the mountebanks, the exploiters, in the same way that the East Village was the psychedelic haven in the 60s, and it became a smack killing field, if you like.
Right.
There was a point where there were so many people involved in this scene that had no comprehension of what the meaning of art, and the weight of that sank the entire scene. It didn't help that people started dying of AIDS.
Right.
But past that, there were the situation arose that people just didn't. I guess there were a lot of key people who felt that they couldn't function here anymore. There was another thing that happened. There was a winnowing out where some key people were seduced into the Soho scene.
Right.
One of the things that happened in the East Village Eye was that we were doing great with those art ads. All those 1/8 pages and 1/4 pages.
Right.
More than anything else. We're talking about people who would spend like $100, $150 for an ad in the East Village Eye. We would write about the arts. We certainly didn't write. We didn't curry. We didn't write favorable reviews that we didn't want to. I'm happy to say we never did that.
Right.
But we wrote about it. And we were really, it was supporting the paper. It was holding up the entire paper for a good 3 years. And but when this winnowing out process happened, so many the artists, the gallery owners were pulled into the downtown, or they say the Soho art sphere. And as they abandoned the East Village, they also abandoned the East Village Eye in many cases.
Right. Right.
So our art advertising plummeted, and the galleries, a lot of them started to move out. Well, the wannabes, when they saw the key players leave, they didn't want to be there. So it was kind of a rush towards the exits. They say in Wall Street, the rush towards the exits.
Right.
And in no time, it was like a deafening silence in the East Village art scene. Remarkable. I'd say it was over two seasons. Like, I'm talking about like maybe fall and spring or something.
Right. In what, 86? 87?
No, I guess it was 86.
Right. Because the eye folded in 87.
And now you mentioned you mentioned about the Carlo's piece about East Village R.I.P.
Yes.
Now that was like, from a publisher's point of view, that was like a really stupid thing for me to run, but I didn't know any better, so I ran it. Carlo and Walter, Carl McCormick, Walter Robinson, who were the art editors of the Eye. Oh, we'll have to talk about them. They wrote this statement about that the East Village art scene was dead. And I don't think they could make it or break it, but they certainly didn't help. So that was
in
really
84.
Was it in '84?
Yeah.
So it rolled on for another year.
Yeah.
Was it in '84? Really? Was it '85?
84. And Carlo said that he was talking about a feeling that the East Village movement had become stultified in a way by the intrusion of another level of commercialism in the East Village movement.
Yeah, he was right, but he could have fought it. But Carlo and Walter, they were both kind of pessimistic,
Right.
and so was I, to a large extent. And so they proposed it, I bought it, we put it in, and it didn't help. Now, Carlo and Walter contributed majorly to the East Village art scene. Now, it was a funny story. The scene was just getting going in '83, I'd say. I knew Walter from Collab. He was a collab artist. He started in the '70s, and but he used to write for Art in America. He had a job at Art in America.
I see.
And so, and Carlo was this kind of neo-hippie with this bowl, like carrot red, bowl-shaped haircut and love beats, and he was like doing his thing at Club 57.
Right.
Anyway, so we had this art editor, Eric Darton, who was leaving, and I just said to Walter at a party, I said, Eric Darton's leaving. I don't know what I'm going to do for an art editor. And he says, I'll do it. So I said, do it. Great.
Cool.
I knew that he was a heavy hitter.
Right.
Then I don't know. I wrote on Carlo, or Carlo popped up, and the two of them, somebody described them to me once, like snickering and giggling through the art scene and creating the art scene. Everybody wasn't really hooked up before. They didn't all necessarily know each other, but they went and talked about and wrote about everybody. They made fun of a lot of people. They razzed a lot of people. But the main thing was they wrote about everybody. And so it magnified the whole thing.
Right.
It was a big booster. So you can see that was one of the reasons when they wrote that thing about how it was dead, it hurt. So they were really instrumental. And I think that with Carlo and Walter in the East Village Eye, I'd say we went pretty far away in making it much more of a scene than it was.
Yeah, it was a vehicle.
And other papers kind of jumped on, but I'd like to think that it wouldn't have been the same if we had done it. Did it.
Yeah, I agree. I think the East Village Eye articulated the movement and codified it in a way, or it coalesced in terms of media, sort of created an aura, so to speak.
Yeah, and we gave everybody their clips. I mean, we wrote about stuff, documented stuff, and then we also had the centerfold that would reprint art. So it was a big advantage. And but I'd say that we had people. Sylvia Falcon was another very important one. Sylvia and Walter and Carlo, and basically all the writers, they were serious about art. Even Carlo and Walter were so sarcastic and pessimistic, even cynical at points. They still ultimately they really cared about art, and they took it seriously.
Were you familiar with the East Village Other?
Yeah, East Village other. I mean, I was just a kid, but I got hold of a few copies. I remember one when I was a kid. I just remember I read the lead article, New York's finest, like Chicago's worst. Some things never change.
Right? Interesting. Well, we've really I've hit the highlights of really what I was interested in talking about with you. Is there anything else that comes to your mind?
Well, let's see. Well, there are a lot of things I don't know.
Well, actually, if you we could always talk again if anything comes up.
No. I think we got the gist of it.
Yeah, I think so. It's basically that this is what I'm focusing on, and that was nice.
Great.
Yeah.
Can we see some of it?
Yeah.